There's also an anti-Catholic tradition in England, which we're able to pick up on too. The shadow in our schools. The shadow in our schools is the arrival of Catholicism here. That's not her shadow, is it? But the idea here is that there's a tradition in America, really coming from England, of being anti-Catholic. The South will hold on to that for a very long time because it doesn't change. Now, this leads to the rise of Nativism, and your next ID is what? The Supreme Order of the Star-Spangled Banner? It's a very long ID, isn't it? It's the final development of several different movements. Nativism is the belief that other people shouldn't move here into your area, and you call yourself the natives. But it's funny when we look at this name of this first association, the Native American Association. What would you think of that would be? Right? But it's not. It's Anglo-Americans in New England who don't like the arrival of Irish, and they say, we've got to pass legislation to stop this. This is a question of a public policy. And it's really an economic policy when it comes down to it. It could have cultural ramifications as well. Everybody wants a policy that benefits them. The lower economic class Anglo would benefit from stopping the flow of immigration, right? Because that would bring up that would stop the reduction in wages. Who benefits from the arrival of the Irish? Anybody in America? What? Yes. The propertied class of the Anglo community benefit from it. So, the propertied class want it, and aren't they usually the drivers of policy? This is the point I've been trying to make repeatedly in this class, that the propertied people almost always control economic policy because they're really good at, they've got time on their hands, they've got know-how, and they've got resources. And they figure out how, they back the legislatures that get the policies they want. So they don't want to restrict Irish immigration. But if you're an Anglo propertied person, all you have to do is come out and say, man, these damn Irish are here, right? And you can kind of say the same things that these other people are, who are looking at you to make change, and you can say it's somebody else's fault. It's some other group that's stopping this. You can play into this talk, but do you really want to do anything about it? Nope. So this group gets organized to try to stop Irish immigration, put restrictions on immigration, but it doesn't happen. Even though there are more people that don't want it than do. We won't get immigration restriction in America on a broad basis for another 100 years, 1926. All right, the Supreme Order of this. What's the Star-Spangled Banner? This is the national flag, right? So here's what they're doing. This is not an uncommon tradition in American history either. We wrap ourselves in the flag. We say we're Americans, and these other people, well, they're not Americans. America's for Anglos. America's for Anglo-Protestants, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. And that trend continues in our culture, this idea of who's American and who's not American. There's like this ideal. They actually have to form a party because they're not getting their interest met because they cannot convince the property people in the Whig Party to do anything about it because the Whigs want the labor. And so they have to break off and form their own party. And they don't make many advancements. But it is a strong political card to play. Eventually it will become part of the Republican Party when it gets formed in 1854. All right, how am I doing on IDs? I ought to go to Baltimore. By the way, this is just some looks at this stuff. We have our first real urban growth. New York City goes from 312 to 800,000, almost 1 million people during this period of time. Philadelphia is going through a huge transformation. That means they're going to need workers and people to build streets and construction jobs, and these cities are going to be fairly close to the mills that get formed. This is outside of Philadelphia. It's the first public water works project. They've got to figure out how to get fresh water into the city, how to get sewage out of the city. So you can imagine that the water you want to drink comes in upstream, and the sewage, you want to make sure that comes downstream, right? But these projects all require workers and capital and the growth of these societies through government intervention, or society getting organized. All right, the Baltimore and Ohio is our first railroad. This is the next part of the infrastructure transformation in America during this period. First, we get the Canal age. Yes, DeWitt Clinton. That's the name of the guy who did the Erie Canal. This is the first manifestation of railroads. They haven't made too big an innovation here, have they? They basically take the traditional stagecoach that we had developed, and they put metal wheels on it, and they've got this steam engine up in front. That's not the Baltimore and Ohio. This is the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. It's got this little steam engine on it. By the way, the English are the first ones who developed this. They got they're the ones who made steam engines. They were pumping water out of mines, and then they realized they could put coal cars on tracks and use steam engines to pull them out. And then they realized they could take these rails from inside the mines and put them outside and begin to move things. By the way, the name of the first English train was called the Rocket, and it went 12 miles an hour. All right, here's what I want you to know. It's called the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. This is the origination. It's originated in Baltimore, and where's it headed? To the Ohio River. Now, the Ohio River is what we had called this whole area up here. It's the Ohio River system. That's this great landed opportunity out there. The development of the Erie Canal shifts trade in America. All of a sudden, New York City is the capital for trade coming from the west, because most of the food is coming that direction now. So Baltimore is losing out on trade. They had been a big merchant marine city based on commerce. So the businessmen in Baltimore realized they have got to make a direct link to the west. And that's what the Baltimore and Ohio River represents for us. It's this realization on the part of Baltimore property people that they've got to take on a state project, a public project. It's actually public-private. It's a private corporation, but it's going to get a lot of benefits from the government. And your ID for that is land grants. The Baltimore Railroad Company, with friends in the Maryland legislature, get Maryland to give land to the railroad company. So because it's a really expensive project, they also give the right to the railroad company to go through certain territories. They got to go out west of Baltimore, and they need a track there, but it's private property. What can we do about that? Can you force people to sell their land? You can. It's called eminent domain. The government can say that we have a prior need here, and we can force you to sell it, and we can have a judge agree to what the proper compensation is. They're fighting over, yes, because they are forcing people to give up land. 160 over here, right? I know some people who had a farm, and part of their farm is on the other side of 160 now, and there's no direct, where they are, there's no direct connection. But we have a policy in America of when property wants something, then they don't mind saying your property is not entirely protected, and we can compel you to change it. Now, if you want to regulate a company and tell them how they have to treat their workers, do they cry foul? Yes, and then they call socialism. But if it's them wanting something, then they say, well, this eminent domain, and they have the ability to get what they want. They're pretty good at it. Chicago is your next ID. Chicago it's known as America's second city. America's first city is New York City. Chicago goes from a small marshy village at the southern end of Lake Michigan to a thriving city in about 20 years. It just is transformed. It explodes because it is the economic hub of the West. It's got something like 30 railroad lines come into Chicago. Something like 50 or 60 trains a day are coming in and out of Chicago. Because that's the place where you bring all the production that needs to get moved into the Erie Canal system and sent west. And so New York merchants who are trying to get food brought to the east will go to Chicago. And what develops in Chicago is the commodities market, right? The Chicago Exchange, that's where we do most of our agricultural commodities in America today, is where they're traded in large volume. Now, this is an interesting phenomenon that's about to take place during the entire 19th century. We are going to become really good at transplanting our civilization out to the west, and we're going to have a great number of cities, not many down here for the 19th century, but they emerge out here. Places like St. Louis and Indianapolis and Buffalo and Detroit. And here's this process. New York families moved to Chicago. but not the whole family. They'll send one of their sons out there who will carry on their business. Maybe it's banking, maybe it's insurance, maybe it's a minister. Because these people out here are going to need all the social institutions that they had back here in order to bring order to this society. So architects move out there, and firms move out there, and education systems, and we simply transplant it all out to Chicago. So we take, young faculty from New England, and we send them out there, and we make universities. And this becomes a pattern of American civilization, and we're really good at it. And Chicago and New York are closely aligned to each other by families. And this is a picture of these railroads that are beginning to try to make inroads. We are getting some railroads in the South as they try to move cotton around the country. All right, now we've got some important technological developments that are also very beneficial to economic growth in America, and that's cell phones. Oh, no, I'm ahead of myself. Telegraphs. The telegraph system is going to be the first instant messenger, and it's pretty cool. This guy, Samuel Morse, and he's your ID, has been learning about the development of electricity. Benjamin Franklin had done a lot of studies on it in the 1700s, late 1700s. In the early 1800s, in Europe, they're making all of these pure research experiments in electricity and magnetism. And that they find out that if you put electricity around a metal pole, you can create a magnetic source. So he comes up with this idea. He can turn off and off a circuit, and it can energize a metal piece, and it becomes magnetized. And then he can turn it off, and it's unmagnetized. And he starts realizing you can make a sound out of this, right? You can turn off and on the code. And so he develops a switching system for this. And then he realizes a moment when if he comes up with a code to translate these clicks into alphabet, then you can relay at great distance across a metal wire a code that can be read at the other end, and somebody can translate it and say, this is what it says. This transforms America because you can now conduct trade at great distances within 30, 40 minutes. Now, here's what I'd like you to know about it. The government plays a role in this. He goes to Congress and he asks for a grant, and he gets a grant of $25,000, which is a pretty good sum of money in 1830. It's for him to pull off an experiment. He wants to put a telegraph station at the bottom of the U.S. Capitol, and he wants to have its terminus be in Baltimore. And he sets up this experiment. He's got the funds for it. He buys the cable. He produces all his boxes, etc. And they have this big moment when a message is sent from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore and back, and they're all like amazed because they see that this is going to be so important. Now he doesn't have trouble raising capital, right? He opens up a company, and he ends up getting capital flowing to him, and then they start laying down telegraph lines. But there was an important role to play at the beginning of it all for the government intervention in the economy. They're realizing we want to put money on this. And we do that today. We offer grants still today for certain things. And that is one of the smart things about America. How do we account for all of the great things that happen in American economy? It's this nice public-private cooperation. And I would submit to you, it's because the propertied people, we have a democracy. We form our own government. And the propertied people who want to see these advancements have been able to get society to do things to help those things move forward. Now, they benefit greatly from it, right? That's the reason that they're behind it. But at the same time, they kind of bring along the rest of the nation as these things develop. Now, they cash in the most, but it creates lots of economic opportunity in America. Talk about creating a lot of jobs. One job is being a telegraph runner. You've got people running all over town delivering messages. That's a good work for Irish kids coming in, right? Or maybe kids coming in from the countryside. Oh, how about building telegraph lines? How about making wire? I mean, this is going to all create a lot of economic activity. We'll probably need so much wire we're not be able to produce it all in America, so we're having to get it from England. And then investors in America start, hey, why don't we try to start making copper wire ourselves? And so we diversify and change.